What's up, everybody? Aaron Nagler here, Cheesehead TV, talking some football with somebody I haven't talked ball with in a long, long time. Justis Mosqueda is here. What's up, Justis? How you doing, man?
Not too bad. Please ignore the map behind me. I don't know what to put behind me, so I put a map because I'll look at it eventually.
Well,
So
it's some decor. Yeah, it's a little something on the walls. It's better than not having anything, right? You
I
gotta.
guess I'm not a big wall starer. So like I didn't know what to put up, but my girlfriend told me that if I don't have anything behind me, I look like a serial
See,
killer.
I
So
knew you didn't do it. I knew there was an outside hand forcing
yeah.
you to put something on the wall there. I love it. All right, let's look at this Packers team. Let's look at, obviously they've had their first preseason game. They're in the midst of joint practices with the Jets. We all know Aaron Rodgers isn't going to play in the preseason, but we all know what he can do. The great mystery, obviously, is Jordan Love and what he's going to bring to this Packers team, most likely starting next year. We'll obviously cross that bridge when we come to it. But 30,000 feet. How did you assess Jordan Love's play in his first preseason action and the first action he's had in like 2 years in a real football game?
Yeah, I thought the boot action stuff from under center was really good for him. He has all the arm talent in the world, all the athleticism in the world that you could ask for a quarterback drafted in the range that he was drafted in. So it was nice to see that that's not going to become an issue with how he's developed, like in the base plays of the system, I guess is the way to explain it. In that, like, if you need him to be a, stretch boot quarterback like the Rams and 49ers have used recently, like he can do that right now. One of the issues that I had with the film was LaFleur talked about it, even that, the Texans basically just ran cover 1 and cover 2 against him. And the fact that Jordan Love was still hitting swing routes against cover 2 with, hard flat zones where it's like that shouldn't have been thrown at all. And he probably should have known what he was getting at that point in the game. That's probably a cause for concern. And then the fact that he had a ball tipped and then that sack fumble on plays where his longer release definitely kind of showed on the field. And that's a thing where, you could talk about fixing mechanics all you want, but when the bullets are live, quarterbacks are going to do what they're most comfortable with. And the fact that he has a longer release, and I mean, he's like 6'4" and he has long forearms, like that kind of is what happens. Like Jared Goff is never going to kick that. I think is a little bit, not necessarily a concern, but kind of limits what you want to do. Like, I don't think Jordan Love would be able to be the quarterback who's throwing those like instant screens to Devontae Adams on the backside of runs and stuff. Like, I think if Jordan Love came into the game, you'd see some of those plays come out, if that makes any sense.
Sure does. Yeah.
But in terms of, positive, negative, I think it was a pretty positive day for him overall, especially, dealing with the offensive line issues that they had and they clearly weren't happy with going into this week.
What do you think about the mechanics? I mean, like you said, it's not something that really you do as a quarterback revert, right? Especially when things break down, which happens in the NFL a lot more than it does in college. But we've seen Aaron Rodgers change his entire kind of gait and the way he held the football coming out as a rookie toward even 2 or 3 years in. Now, obviously, that was a pretty decent sized transformation. I don't think Jordan needs to do an insane amount of work, but is there a way to shorten his release given his physical makeup?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at like what some of the guys with longer forearms do in the league, like Cam Newton, holding the ball out at like a 45-degree angle instead of like straight down, definitely helps you when you separate your shoulders. I'm going to explain this. We're going to do a little coaching clinic right here.
I love it.
Like if your hands are here, right? So the ball comes straight down. When you release, right, your shoulders are creating this negative angle. So the ball is going to end up dropping down below the weight, and then your arm ends up like peeling back through. Right. So you don't necessarily go point A to point B to point C, but if the ball is pointed out and you're able to separate, your shoulders separate clearly, ball stays at about shoulder level, and then you're just straight through it right there. So there are certainly things that he can do. It just becomes like, hey, are you so comfortable in your mechanics that when there's a free rusher that you're know your mechanics enough that you lean into it under pressure? Like, that's really where the issues come in. You can drill whatever you want, throw whatever you want on air, but when the bullets are live, what are you going to do? I mean, that's really what we're measuring guys on anyway.
You mentioned the protection or lack thereof on Saturday. Obviously, he was out there with, I mean, I think two starters to begin with in Myers and maybe Patrick, although that sounds like that's up in the air as well. But, when you talk about the work they have done up front in the past, you have to think going forward, this is a team that has prioritized the offensive line, growing their own offensive line. They're not a team that goes out and really gets guys in free agency in that regard. They usually draft and develop. Do you think that changes much during a transition to Love, say next year, if, in the sense of they're always going to be a zone run team, right? They're always going to be using that boot action that you mentioned. I mean, this is on the job training in the best possible way. It sucks that we're probably not going to see him against the Jets due to the injury, but I mean, this is the offense, right? This is
Right.
the offense that you got to think that Jordan Love is going to be hopefully running for years to come. Good protection, bad protection, making the best of what you got in front of you. Do you think that this suits him? Do you think this is the best kind of, maybe not the best for him specifically, but do you think they can win a lot of games with him at quarterback in this offensive system?
Yeah, for sure. It's just small things, right? So like the now screens, those are probably going to be out of the book, which is fine. Plenty of teams don't run now screens and win football games at the NFL level. I think the boot action stuff fits him very well because he's a quarterback that excels when he's on the move and asked to throw. So I don't think any of that has to change. It's more of the straight drop back stuff.
Right.
It would just be, I guess the way to think about it, right, is if you're asking Jordan Love to be a straight drop back passer, you're going to need better tackles than they had on Saturday, which they're probably going to have if,
you would think, right.
yeah, if he's starting an actual ball game, unless you're going through a Kansas City Chiefs type of injury situation, right. You should be fine. So that's kind of where I'm at on that. There's no real cause for concern, in my opinion. But again, the Texans weren't really throwing a lot out there.
It's funny, too, because I think you and I have talked offline about the quick game, right? And running stick or what have you. And that is something that McVay really didn't have in his arsenal until he got his ass handed to him by Belichick in the Super Bowl, because they took away a lot of the long developing stuff and they really didn't have a quick game to go to. Do you think Jordan could be adept at that as far as like running stuff that just moves the sticks, stuff that just gets you 3, 4, 5 yards on those kind of traditional West Coast looks on early downs, just to stay ahead of the sticks?
Yeah, I mean, everything that he was doing in that game, like it wasn't like he was taking a bunch of shot plays or anything.
Right.
There were a couple of them, but they were asking him to operate a real offense at that point.
There were a couple of times I was going to say, like at the line of scrimmage, it really looked like there were check with me's and 50-50s that he called. I was a bit surprised by that.
Yeah, they were saying in the, I think it was the post-game presser, they were talking to him about the cans, right? That's what that's how they call it, the cans, where they call in 2 plays and he basically has the choice at the line. And they said that they gave him some freedom there. So I don't think that would be an issue. But like you said, with the McVay stuff, I mean, they learned with Jared Goff that they wanted to be an under center team because of how they could throw on the run, and they wanted to run stretch and they want to run jet. And it's a lot harder to do that when you're not under center and the quarterback doesn't instantly have the ball and you can do some of these ball fakes. But the problem was Goff, with his throwing motion, it was never going to be good under center to do quick game stuff. So that would be interesting. I know it seemed like a lot of the quick game stuff too was out of the gun with Jordan Love, which isn't a problem. If you can live in it, it just becomes a question of like, all right, well then do teams know when we're under center that it's just going to be stretch and boot? Like that's everything's about constraints. Any NFL team can run anything. It's about constraints and making sure that your tendencies don't tell too much to the defense before you get the ball out.
That makes a world of sense. Let's flip it over to the defensive side of the ball. Obviously, we're not going to see much in preseason when it comes to scheme or play calling or dialing up stuff. However, that said, were you surprised how much Oren Burks got the green light on Saturday night? I mean, I think that's the most I've seen the inside backer in Green Bay blitz in a preseason game probably in 10 years. I was a bit surprised by that. How about you?
Yeah, and they're blitzing him from depth. I mean, that's kind of a different thing than Pettin, where Pettin's walking all those guys to the line of scrimmage and then just asking Shanahan to run trap on him. But Burks was
you had to go there. You had to flit it in.
I mean, it still hurts me.
I know it hurts to this day, no doubt about it.
So yeah, it's interesting that they are blitzing guys like that. I will say that the big thing that everyone thinks about with that Rams style defense, which is really like the college style coverages, right?
Right.
The match quarter stuff. Um, Houston, I was actually going to chart the game to figure out what they were doing. Houston basically didn't go any four open. Like they basically had an inline tight end or a fullback in the game the entire time.
Right.
So you basically didn't get any indication on how they're going to handle that in this past game. And with the Jets coming in, I'd be very surprised if that showed up there too. So if we're going to make an evaluation on like Joe Barry, is he going to run match quarters, the man match stuff? That's probably not. We're not going to get an answer for that until the Buffalo game in the preseason. Honestly,
Right.
that's
That
kind
makes
of my thought there.
And I think that makes a lot of sense. Okay, can you explain to some people, the laymen out there, the folks watching, going, match what? I'm sorry. Can you explain match concepts, because you see that bandied about a lot, but in lieu of sending people to some coach's clinic, can you give us a layman's version of what match coverage is?
Essentially, think of it as teams no longer wanting to play spot drop zone and wanting their defensive backs to cover players because a hash mark has never caught a pass. Right. So that's kind of their approach, is that like, all right, what can we do? How can we cover these guys while also having tight coverage? And you hear the Packers coaching staff consistently talk about playing sticky coverage, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically a way to sort route combinations. The way it happens is they split the field in half. So when you split the field in half, the two sides of the defense coverage wise are working completely independently from each other. And their job is to create tight coverages to specific route combinations. And that's kind of the way to think about it. And they call them brackets. So essentially having one bracket to each side of the field where you're double covering a guy. So you could call a play on the defensive side that would bracket a corner route, for example, so that a guy is over top, but a guy is also underneath, so that corner route can't get snapped. And there's not space underneath it when teams are running smash or something like that. So it's basically a way to kind of create like man coverage that has a double team on each side of the field, but everyone's job is independent from each other, and it's all sorted out through what route combinations happen.
But that's the thing I really want to point out to people, is that a lot of this work gets done after the snap as far as recognition goes. There's calls, obviously, but the idea that these guys have to be on the same page, it's a miracle to me that we don't see more busted coverages. You know what I mean?
And
because
they're
the fact that they're doing this,
too.
they're talking, but it's all, and a lot of it is handled live in the moment. That's crazy to me. And I don't think a lot of fans kind of grasp that. The fact that you're seeing the corner out develop, and that you're making the coverage kind of adjustment the same way we hear about wide receivers, right? Reading the coverage and going, well, how they're going to break off the route, what space they're going to go into, etc., what route they are actually going to run. The same thing happens on the defensive side, especially in match. And to me, that's something that I think a lot of people, because it's always, whenever somebody's open, and hell, the guys in the booth do it all the time. Oh, he was in man coverage. And well, okay, it wasn't strictly man, but it appears that way because of the route he ran. Looking at we talked about the linebacker kind of blitzing from depth, etc., and Barry. What do you think about, to me, this team will go as far as it can on the defensive side of the ball by whatever happens up front. We've seen year after year where, they can be taken advantage of at times, but then they seem to always kind of coalesce as the year goes on. That also seems to coincide with Kenny Clark, who always kind of starts slow and then has a barn burner kind of last month of the season. What do you think about the addition of TJ Slayton, bringing back the guys that they did? Is this a unit that can, obviously they're not going to replicate what the Rams did. No one can without Aaron Donald, but can they do enough to allow them to operate the way they want to on defense?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to pull up their depth chart right now. I know Rashawn Gary's had a great camp. Obviously he has all the talent in the world right now. He's probably, honestly, his pass rushing repertoire is built around the bull rush, but he's probably top 5 in the league at what he does. So as long as, hey man, if that ace card works against 80% of offensive tackles, keep using that ace card. So I think pass rushing wise, they're going to be fine unless they get a cluster of injuries. And then obviously, when you're down to your fourth pass rusher, you're probably not getting much off of the bench. The defensive line was more of a concern for me earlier in camp, just because they didn't have very many big bodies. And that becomes an issue because those bodies eventually go down, and those are the players who end up usually with knees, backs, feet. It's hard to play football at that size. I think we have enough evidence of that at this point. TJ Slaton is an enormously talented player in terms of pure skill set. I mean, he was from that school in Florida that put 7 draft picks into the league this past year, that high school. So he didn't even see the defensive side of the ball. He had like 3 tackles like his senior year there. He was looked at as like a guard prospect before he ended up at the University of Florida. So he's very raw. And I think, the post-practice pressers where all the guys talk about him seem to be on the same page where it's, hey, that guy's crazy talented. He needs more reps, is kind of where everyone is at. Outside of that, I mean, Heflin in the game, being able to get that TFL. Yeah.
I like Heflin a lot.
He was talented too. I was kind of surprised he was a UDFA when what's his name? Golston was drafted by the Cowboys in like the 3rd round. And I was like, I don't think there's a huge difference between those two.
Well, that's the draft though, right? That's what drives me crazy every year when people talk about, draft, like their rankings and whatever. I'm like, you realize in the eye of the beholder, like you just said, a guy could literally be taken in the 3rd round and or undrafted. And there's a possibility that the talent level between the two is not all that great.
It's right. And then you throw in injuries and character evaluations and all that, and it doesn't even become about on-field talent anymore. And that's a lot of what's happening in the draft nowadays anyway. So, it'll be interesting. But now that Green Bay has kind of proven that they have the bodies up front, that they can get through an NFL season, I'm less worried about those guys up there because, again, I don't think they're going to be out in strict like base 34 personnel very often anyway. So you're probably not going to need 3 of those guys on the field at the same time very often.
One would hope not. No doubt about it. Justis, I can't thank you enough for hanging out and talking ball with me. Before I let you go, I want to ask you one final question back on the offensive side of the ball. We've heard Aaron talk a number of times. We've heard Matt mention it regarding what, the little adjustments they have done for the playbook, things that they maybe didn't work so well last year. What could they possibly be looking at to say, oh, this didn't work last year? Because it sure looked like kind of everything worked. Like, there was times when things maybe they didn't convert or maybe there was a mistake on the field, but offensively, like design wise, I'm struggling, man. I went back and watched every game a couple times this offseason, and there are times when maybe a guy was overmatched or what have you. Like there's a physical kind of matchup that they lost. But wow, playbook-wise, it's hard to see what they would have tinkered with to say, we don't want to – we just want to get rid of this.
I'm sure it has more to do with like how we want to attack specific fronts and specific coverages, honestly. And then like what you do at the line, because a lot of their stuff, I mean, it's zone. Like it's kind of hard to mess up zone unless you get your ass beat one-on-one. So
we saw that Saturday night. So
yeah. But I think it's more of like from that perspective rather than, hey, should we throw out all the jet plays? Should we not run jet plays anymore? Should we not run split back gun? I don't think those are the conversations.
Hey man, I love me some split back gun, and I will not rest until I see AJ Dillon on a wheel route out of split backs, because that needs to happen. They ran it last year. They just didn't throw it to him. I'm all about that. Justis, I can't thank you enough for hanging out. Where can people find your stuff? Where are you? You've been a bit of a nomad, kind of a Ronin, going from spot to spot, but I believe you've landed someplace now. Where can people find your work?
Yes, sir. Acme Packing Company, SB Nation. So we're running the team blog right now. We're about to get our podcasting network up and stuff like that. And
there you go.
Real excited about the season. So.
Awesome.
Find me there.
Make sure you check out his work. Justis, can't thank you enough, man. Thanks so much for hanging out and talking football.
Yes, sir. Anytime.